What's up, everybody? Kyle Barboza here, bass player, music educator, and we're talking about the basics of playing chords today. So we're going to talk about technical considerations when playing chords, because there are a few really important ones. And we're going to talk about some chord voicings that I think are kind of like the essential ones for everybody to know. Okay, so couple really interesting things about chords on a bass that we're going to have to remember when we're talking about these things. One, the technique is going to be a little different than just playing regular single notes. We'll get into that in a little bit. But two, we really have to consider a lot of things about the nature of this instrument, namely that the bass is in the lower register. It's always the lowest register instrument in any ensemble. So we have to consider that the way that affects the sound of chords on the bass and the way that it kind of affects the function of playing chords on the bass. But all right, without further ado, let's get into some of the chord voicings that everybody should know to start, and then we'll kind of cover the technique as we go. The most basic chord that everybody should learn on bass, or type of chord, is the power chord, or the perfect fifth, as it would be called in music theory terms. And that is like the chord you play when you go up one string and up 2 frets, right? So I'm going to start on a D here, put my index finger here, and up a string, up 2 frets, to that A there. That's the interval of a fifth, right? And the cool thing about this chord is it's probably the most versatile chord you can play on bass, because it doesn't have a major or minor tonality. So I can play this on both major and minor chords. And on top of that, this interval of a fifth is a really consonant, bright-sounding interval. So because of that, you can play this chord on any part of the bass, whether it be up here or down in the low register. And it still sounds pretty good without being too muddy. In fact, I love playing these chords in the really low register at certain times in a song because I think it just sounds so cool. It's got such a cool texture. But anyway, I digress. This is an example, obviously, of a chord that is played on 2 adjacent strings, right? Like the E and the A string, or the D and the A and the D string, or the D and the G string, right? And the way I like to play this one, technique-wise, is to use two different fingers, right? I like to actually use my ring finger and my middle finger for these fifth chords, and to pluck the strings at the same time, like this. All right? You can also use your index and your middle finger. In fact, for many of you, that'll probably be a more natural way to do this. You can also use one finger and just rake across the strings like that, but like quickly. So it kind of sounds like they're played together. That's fine too. In fact, if you do that, you can go pretty fast with it if you get smooth with it. But that's the right hand. When it comes to technique on all of these chords I'm going to show you, we're going to use the technique that creates the least amount of tension. I've harped on this before in videos. Muscle tension is the enemy of good technique, and therefore it's the enemy of good sound. So whatever gives us the least amount of tension in our hands is what we're going to use for technique for playing these chords. And when it comes to a power chord, that's why I kind of like to use the ring finger and my middle finger. It just feels like it's the least amount of tension for me, okay? Might not be for you, but try that out. In terms of the left hand, though, you'll notice that I like using my index finger and my pinky for this chord. Even though it's only a 2-fret stretch, for me, with my baby hands, that's quite a stretch for me, even up here on the bass. So too much tension there. So I'm just going to take the tension away by using my pinky. There you go. Simple as that, okay? All right, this is a good one to practice. Another consideration that I want you to keep in mind is I'm always going to keep my fingers against the edge of the fret on any given fret, okay? So not in the middle between the 2 frets, but against the edge of the next fret is where my fingers are gonna stay. That's just one of those technique things that I always do and that you should always do too, all right? It doesn't affect the intonation. Well, it does if you squeeze your notes, it will actually affect your intonation, but it just tends to get a better sound, a more consistent sound on the bass if you get into the habit of playing against the fret, and it creates the least amount of tension because you're pushing the string down the least amount that you have to. That takes a little more force right there in the middle of the fret than the edge of the fret. So just one of those habits that I really, really recommend you get into. Another theme of the technique with these chords that you're going to see is that, like I said, least amount of tension, the better. So for some of these, my bottom finger is not going to actually fret the note like it normally does with the tip of. I usually use like pretty close to the tip of my fingers to fret notes because you want a natural curve on your fingers. But with chords, sometimes using the pad of your finger or a little more toward the pad is going to be easier. So you'll notice on some of these chords that I'm using, check it out, can you see that? The pad of my finger, you can see that little indent? Here, I'll do it again. More the pad of my finger than the tip of my finger, okay? That's fine. Again, less tension is better. So whatever gives you the least amount of tension, do that. Okay, so let's see here. The next type of chord I want to show you is what would be called, I guess you could call this a 10th chord or a 10th interval. Really, it's a major, or this is a way of playing a major or a minor chord. So now we're going to actually add the tonality. This will also be good for augmented chords and diminished chords though, because with this is another 2-note chord, but we're only going to be playing the root and the third of the chord now. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the third of the chord, so we're going to start with A here, right? I'm going to put my second finger on the root of the chord, all right? And then I'm going to take my third of the chord, which in this case would be C sharp for an A major chord, but I'm going to put it up an octave. So this is going to be from the E string, the bottom note, and the top note's going to be on the G string, 1 fret up. Check it out. Okay, 5th fret, 6th fret. And for my major chord, which this is a major chord, I'm going to use the tip of my pinky on the top note. Okay, so I got middle finger on the bottom. Again, I'm kind of using the pad of my middle finger and my pinky, the tip of my pinky on that bottom note. And this is going to give me a nice warm sounding major chord. I love the sound of these chords. Okay. Cool, right? And another consideration technique-wise, okay, a couple things here, but first with my left hand, because we've been talking about this a lot, I'm going to allow my thumb also to move where it needs to move, again, for the umpteenth time, to create as little tension as possible. And in this case, I'm noticing that depending where I am on the neck, I'm using more of the bone of my thumb instead of the pad of my thumb on the neck, which is, I would never do that if I were playing single notes. My thumb basically stays right on the middle of the neck when I'm playing single notes, but in this case, I'm going to use more of the bone of my thumb, and I'm also going to allow my hand to rotate how it needs to rotate, again, to create the least amount of tension. So you can see that my hand is, you see the angle that my hand is at right now? Not normal. This is how I normally fret, right, at a perpendicular angle. But for these major and minor chords, I'm going to turn my hand just a little bit. Okay, and the next thing, for these chords, I'm using kind of a pinch technique. I like to pinch my thumb on the bottom string and my index finger on the top string. And there you go. You get a nice warm sound. And I'm using the pads of my fingers, but you can use the tips. You can go down toward the bridge. You can go up toward the neck. Both of those things are going to give you a different sound on this, a different texture, which is definitely something you want to consider. But that's the overall right hand technique I'm using for these 10th chords. So that was the major chord. Now let's talk about the minor chord. So the major chord was middle finger, pinky. Well, to get a minor chord out of this, I got to move my top string down 1 fret to get the minor third. So to play, I'll go back to A major chord. So I need that 5th fret on the G string to get a minor chord. And to do that, I think the best way to do that is to use the tip of your ring finger. You can use your pinky, that works too, okay? But I like to use the tip of my ring finger for this one. Whatever is less tense for you. And that's how you get a little minor chord out of this. Again, this is the interval of a 10th, which is the same thing as a 3rd plus an octave, okay? Cool. Now, practicing these is pretty simple, but it takes some practice to getting your hand used to this position, to build some muscle memory here. So I think a good way to practice this is the way a lot of guitar players practice chords when they first start playing chords, is to start with your hand just kind of relaxing on your lap, okay? I would turn a metronome on, give yourself 4 beats to get your hand in position with whatever chord you're working on, and then pluck the chord for 4 beats. Let it hold for 4 beats, and then take your hand down, give yourself another 4 beats to get back. Okay, so check it out. Use whatever tempo you need to. What we're working on is getting that hand position where your top finger is using the tip, your bottom finger is using the pad, nice and relaxed, all right? So to do a major chord, be like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Once you can get it in 4 beats, try it in 3 beats. Once you can get it in 3, try it in 2. Work your way until you can get it in 1 beat. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. And then work your scales too. Okay, so great exercise for these intervals is to do your major scale up and down. Major scale, again, the 1 chord is major, the 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is going to be a major, 5 is going to be a major, 6 is going to be a minor, 7 is going to be a half diminished, but remember, when we use the minor version of this, it works for diminished chords too. So I'll go all the way up the scale using these. I'll go up the G scale here. G, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp, half diminished, G, and then back down. Okay? So that's a great way to practice these. All right, so now you've got a way to basically cover any chord you play. But let's kind of get into one more iteration of a chord that uses adjacent strings that's got a little more color to it. But since it has more color to it, in other words, it has a little more tension to it, because of this is going to be, these next couple chords are going to be ones that you want to use mostly in the upper register of the bass, because it's going to get muddy once you use it in the lower register, okay? And the chord that I'm talking about here is the interval of a minor sixth or a major sixth. So, in other words, up 1 string, up 3 frets, minor sixth, like that. Okay, so I'm going to go with my root note will be a G here. So up 1 string, up 3 frets is an E flat. So G to E flat, that's a minor sixth. Okay, I don't know, we'll talk about what kind of chord this creates, but for now, let's just call it what it is, as an interval between the 2 notes, minor sixth, and then a major sixth, which is up 1 more fret on the top note, up 1 string and 4 frets up. So I'm going to stretch my pinky a little bit. Again, least tension, is whatever you need to do. In this case, I got to lower my thumb quite a bit on the neck to get this without creating a lot of tension. So this one's the major sixth interval, okay, G to E. Nice sound, right? Okay, so if we go up from like the power chord, G to D power chord, up a fret minor sixth, up a fret major sixth, all right? And then back down, kind of has that James Bond thing, right? But in terms of what chord this makes, how this works in the harmony of a song, Usually, you can use this in two ways. One way is by descending from the power chord. So let's G power chord again. If I move the root down one fret, you kind of get that the sound that you hear in the song. What's the name of the tune? Hold On Loosely by 38 Special. It's kind of like the Hold On Loosely chord. Check it out. Power chord. Move down a fret, you get the minor sixth. Move down another fret, you get a major sixth. Sorry, I had to finish it there, but anyway, so you can use it that way, but what's happening there actually is we are playing an inverted chord by using this minor sixth and major sixth interval. The minor sixth interval, if I reverse the order of the notes in it, so let's go from F sharp, I had an F sharp here on the bottom, and then a D on the top. If I turn those around and pretend that D is on the bottom as my root, and F sharp is on the top, you get a major chord. It's D major. So this minor sixth interval is really an inverted major chord. It's the way that you're almost always going to use it 90% of the time in a song. The major sixth interval, which I've got here from F to D, the reverse of that is going to be a minor chord. This is a D minor chord. So the top note is the root, and it's a minor chord for that root, okay? Hear it? All right, so same quality as this. Oh, I used my pinky on that one, so I guess I used both. Anyway, same quality as this D minor chord, but just a different, kind of a different texture, a different color. Major. So now even with these kind of, what do we got? We got a power chord, we got the major third, the minor third, the tenths, and then the sixths, which are also major and minor chords. Now we have basically a way to play a lot of different like chord progressions, right? I can use that tenth. There's the minor sixth. My power chords. Same chords, but with the tenth. So there's a variety of things now that you can do with these basic chord shapes. Beginners, intermediate players, advanced players. Speaking of learning chords, this would be a great thing to work with a private teacher. And, you know, let's say that private teacher could be me. I don't know, you never know. Anyway, if you're interested in private lessons with me, I am building a waiting list for June, this summer. I'm going to be opening up full time. You guys have probably heard me say this already, but if you're on the fence about this, look, email me at the email in the description. Get on my waiting list. Let's work on jazz. Let's work on funk, slap bass, picking. Let's work on rock and roll, writing songs, writing bass lines. Whatever you want to work on, I'm game for it. So get in touch. But let's do one more thing with the minor sixth and the major sixth, and that is we can also position them up by skipping a string, okay? So instead of doing this as my minor sixth, I can also take the root, the D, and put it on the G string. So skip a string and go down 2 frets. That gets me a minor sixth as well, okay? And note that I'm going to use that kind of pinch technique to get the chord out there. And if you go up a fret too, again, you get the major sixth. So instead of this, let's see here, instead of this for my major sixth, F to D, I can go ahead and put the D here. Makes it a lot easier to play, right? Especially in the lower part of the neck. But the cool thing about this last chord that I'm showing you, or the last position for this type of chord, is that it's showing me that it doesn't have to just be a major or minor chord with that root on the top that we talked about, the inverted major or minor chord. This also serves as a major chord if I use the major sixth, right? The major sixth. So let's skip a string down a fret, the major sixth here, right? This is actually also gonna be the same as playing that major chord. It's a major chord without the root, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. Major chord without the root. If I play A to F sharp, that major sixth, well, that's the fifth and the third of a D major chord. It's missing the root, the D, but it also is valid as a D major chord because you don't have to play the root of a chord to necessarily be that chord, right? The only thing with that is it is going to be a little bit ambiguous as a bass player to use this as a major chord without the root, because on bass, it's not like we have another bass player in the ensemble playing the root note. We don't have that, right? So we're relying on ourselves to kind of provide the foundation for the chord. So this does become an ambiguous thing, but the option is still there. Now the minor sixth is also a chord with the root. We talked about that. This is a G chord. So you can use these chords in different ways and combinations to play all kinds of scales, just like we, played the major scale with the tenths. We can also do major scales, but in inversions with this chord. So check out the F major scale with no roots in it. Watch. I'm going to start with this sixth here, which is F major without the root. Check it out. Okay, so just another option that you have for using these simple two-note chord voicings. They can get you a lot of mileage. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for now. This is definitely going to be a part one. I definitely want to get into dominant chord voicings, minor sevenths, minor nines, all kinds of... There's so many other different chord voicings that we can get into in a second video that I would love to kind of delve into. So let's plan on that for maybe next week, maybe the week after, something like that. But for now, I hope this is enough for you to work on or food for thought. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video. Please comment. It always helps the channel. And subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys on the next one.